Hey everyone, it's Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Just wanted to talk a little bit about what we discussed on the program this afternoon. If you're employed in a job and you get laid off, or you choose to quit a job and go someplace else, what do you do with your 401k plan? Unfortunately, pop culture, finance, and Washington have made this a way more complicated process than it needs to be. Today on Prudent Money, I talk a little bit about the options and what I think is the best option for that situation. Also, if you find yourself in a situation where you could benefit from a rollover, whether from another advisor or from an old company, or if you are 59 and a half, there's an opportunity for you as well, even if you're still currently employed. Let me know because we can show you the pros and cons as well as how easy it is to move from one institution to another. A lot easier than they make it out to be. And if you just have a question, say that you know where you want to move your money and you want a step-by-step how to do that, we are happy to give that to you. There's no cost to that and happy to help if we can. Also, make sure that you catch the information about the new webinar that's going to be taking place on Thursday, February the 20th at noon, Reaching Your Retirement Goals in a Complicated and Changing World. We're basically going to get back to the basics because things are very complicated in our country right now and in other countries as well, ones that we're involved in. And the list is long as far as risk goes, but it really means to go back to the bases, figure out what's most important to you, figure out what you want retirement to look at, and then figure out what steps you have to take. And it's a lot easier. It's very, like I call it in the program, I call it simple math. Very, very simple, easy math. It just, the key is not to be intimidated by the math, which sometimes happens. But we'll talk about that. And if you got any questions for me, please give me a call at 972-386-0384. Or always feel free to send an email at info@prudentmoney.com. So what do you do with your 401k plan when you leave your company? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, today we've got a lot going on. There's a lot I want to cover. First of all, if you got a question for me, this is probably the most important. Please go to prudentmoney.com. There's a Get Help link at the top of the page. Just click through, send an email in. We'll get you taken care of. If that doesn't do it, we can always schedule a call and talk you through an answer to your problem or whatever you're dealing with. So that's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. And if you're on the newsletter list that we send out the podcasts on, basically every time something changes on Prudent Money, you would have just gotten information about this. But we are going to be rolling out our next webinar, presenting our next webinar, February the 20th. Now, let me ask you a question. Is during the day a good time for a webinar, even if it's a 30-minute webinar? The way that I look at it, what's wrong with the idea of doing more regular webinars and just do them shorter? That way you can get a hold of the information, you can grasp it, and you can move on to learn something new. So anyways, what we're grappling with, but this particular webinar I thought a lot about because we typically go over all the risks, all of the things that are going on in this country that pose a risk for the stock market, other countries. And, generally speaking, I come up with a list of about 10 to 12 items that we need to be careful about. There's a couple of problems to go along with that. First of all, I think that making you aware of risks that you're probably already aware of is maybe not a good use of time. Second, it's very hard to catch on to a lot of these technical aspects of what we talk about, when really the key, I think, is to keep it with the basics, because the basics are where the learning comes from, and the basics build a foundation, and they ultimately give you the answers that you want. So that's what we're going to focus on this time is the basics. And the title of the webinar is Reaching Your Retirement Goals in a Complicated and Changing World. And we're going to go through the 4 simple keys to unlock your retirement goals. And I find that there's people that I would assume that would know how this works don't really know how it works. And I think this is going to be really a good informational webinar, something that you can really apply and use. And we're going to go through all of it and talk through the process. And we're going to do it in 30 minutes. Now, I'll stick around, obviously, after the 30 minutes and answer any of your questions that you want to talk about. But for those of you who are squeezing it in at lunch, and this is, I started to say something earlier about this, and I would love your feedback on, is 12 o'clock during the day a good time to do this? And trying to keep them in shorter segments. Let me know. Just go to prudentmoney.com and send an email in, and I would certainly appreciate it. But let's talk a little bit about your 401k plan and your company that you're working for. And unfortunately, we're starting to see unemployment data that is showing that there are layoffs starting to happen. And you never know where that's going to lead to, but it's always important to be ready for it if it happens. I think we did a program, I don't know, a couple weeks ago about some of the steps that you take. But we're focusing in on the 401k plan because what I've started to learn, and I kind of think pop culture finance for this, is that it's gotten an easy concept has become something that's really overly complicated. And when it's not really that big of a deal. Let me go through your 5 options, or 6 options, excuse me, and then we'll get into what the government's trying to do to simplify something that, if you want to oversimplify it, I guess you can. To me, the system works well as it's set up, and then what pop culture finance says about it. And then what you really need to know about rolling over your 401k to something else if you were to get laid off. But basically, you have what's called a cash out. You could transfer your money to another 401k. You could wait 60 days. You could take your money out of your 401k but you have 60 days to put it back somewhere else. Then you have what's called a 59.5 direct rollover from your company to your IRA, even if you're still employed there. And then, of course, just a rollover. And in that category would fall what's called a direct transfer. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit, it can be a little bit confusing why it makes sense for people to help out. But this is listen, this is unbelievable. Listen to the languaging that you could find on most government sites about what to do if you get laid off and what kind of transfer that you can make. It says an IRA transfer involves moving funds between identical account types at different institutions without tax implications or IRS reporting requirements. Rollovers can be direct or indirect, moving funds between different types of retirement plans. Direct rollover transfer funds directly between accounts and must be reported to the IRS but are not taxed. Indirect rollovers involve it's almost over, I promise. Indirect rollovers involve the account holder receiving the funds, which must be deposited into within 60 days to avoid taxes and penalties. And then the IRS limits individuals to 1 indirect rollover per year, whereas there are no limits on the number of transfers. That was the bullet point answer to what are your options. I don't know about you, but I was ready to give up on that about option number 2. But in my opinion, there's such an easier way to do this. But now, this is kind of interesting because now the government is rolling out, and this has to do with the Secure 2.0 Act, some new portability options that, and let's read it to you. It says the department's, we'll only go halfway because you'll know why. The department's proposed rule would implement Section 120 of the Secure 2.0 Act, which allows an automatic portability provider to receive a fee in connection with executing an automatic portability transaction for certain distributions into a safe harbor plan. Is it? I mean, it's no wonder that people are going, what did they just say? And so they're setting it up that you can get somebody for a fee. Just don't like this idea, to show you how to move money from one place to another place. I'm going to show you for free here how to do this in just a second. Now, what they don't tell you is that there are, in effect, portability laws, portability rules, and I believe that they went into that they were signed into action, I think, in the early 2000s. But basically, your money can go from a 401k to a 401k. It can go anywhere. It can follow you around. And this next article that I have makes it sound like this is such a tough process. It needs to be revamped. I'll go over that with you. Then we'll talk about what are the steps that you take and to get this done. Now, we always want to check in to see what Pop Culture Finance says. And the title to this article is "Retirement Expert: 401ks have a portability failure, and that's a problem for employees." Let's dive in. The 401k system, introduced in 1978, is showing its age and grappling with significant challenges. Currently, only about 50% of workers have access to these plans through their employers, and the system wasn't built to accommodate today's increasingly mobile workforce. She goes on to write that why portability failure is a problem for workers. When an employee leaves an employer with a 401k, one of four things typically happen. Some leave the 401k behind, noting that some 25% of all assets in 401k plans are abandoned or lost. That's 29 million people who have lost their 401k plan. When they walk away from it, they forget about it, she said, and that's a problem. It's interesting. I think that the people that are really participating in their 401k plans, and this is an important point, and decided to sign up on their own, they weren't forced to sign up, are not going to be the ones that leave their 401k plan. I think if you're forced to if you're automatically enrolled and you're forced to make a deposit into that account, then you are probably more or less likely to leave it there, by mistake, of course, but it's just not top of mind because it wasn't your passion to set it up to begin with. It wasn't on what you had in mind. You want to get a lot of workers just want to get every penny of their check they can get, not put money back in a 401k plan. So I think that they probably care a whole lot less. And that's always going to be a problem. But 29 million people, that's interesting where I'm interested where she got that number. But once again, I think if they would get rid of forcing people to do things, some of these statistics would change. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. We are up against a break. Stick around, and I'll be right back. This is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Well, it is complicated. On the one hand, you know what you would like to do in retirement. On the other hand, you can't imagine that it even be possible. Then you add everything from the ramifications of artificial intelligence to cyber currency to the increased risk of investing. It just seems complicated. Well, I find that two roadblocks stand in the way of you in retirement. First, you need to accept that it doesn't have to be complicated. It's really just easy math. Second, you need to understand 4 simple keys to unlock your retirement goals. In other words, you need to start back at the basics. Once you do that, it will start to make sense, even if you're not good at math. You'll still get it. On February 20th, we'll teach you these 4 keys in webinar format. We will start at 12 noon and spend 30 minutes together learning the 4 keys. If you want to be able to answer the question, am I on track for retirement? This is something you don't want to miss. Sign up today at prudentmoney.com and we will look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, I'm Jill Taylor, inviting you to join me each Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for Choose Life Radio. You'll hear people from across America sharing their stories of faith, forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. Choose Life Radio will encourage you to fully appreciate the gift of life. You may also find help for you or a friend in need. So please join me Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock right here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. You'll start to see more information about this, but if you have not signed up for the February 20th webinar, and it's going to be at 12 o'clock in the afternoon to 12:30, and I promise you within that 30-minute investment, you're going to get some valuable information into how to set up and track your retirement goals. And like I said, just 30 minutes. Just go to the website and sign up for it. You'll see the, once you go to the website, that pop-up, hope you like pop-ups, the pop-up will come up and you can easily register for it. But that's on Thursday, and that is a week from this Thursday, and February 20th is the date. We're talking about some of the problems with transferring or the portability issues of moving money from one old job to a new job, or just moving money, period, from an old job. And before the break, we were talking about what Pop Culture Finance has to say about it. And they're saying that 29 million people have lost their 401k plan. 25% of all assets go into 401k plans that are abandoned or lost. And 29 million people have lost their 401k plan. I doubt that's the case, but we'll go with their numbers. Others roll their 401k plan into an IRA. About $800 billion has been rolled out of 401k plans into IRAs. And then a tiny segment of people choose to roll it into a new employer's 401k plan, but it's often a hard thing to roll another employer's 401k plan. I don't think that that's the problem, and I think the tiny segment of people choosing to roll it into a new plan is choosing not to because it's not that great of an idea. 401k plans today as a whole are not just great plans. It's kind of hit and miss, as we've talked about in the past. And then still other cases, employees cash out their 401k plan. And that, of course, is a portability failure. I would agree with her. It's a lot for us to expect people to make these decisions every time they change jobs about where they're going to put their retirement, what investments they're going to have. It's the most important asset that people have in their life. You see, this is what I love about Pop Culture Finance. They take and they impose their values and their goals on you. Guess what? It may not be your most important asset. If it were your important asset, you would have moved it. You would, but here's the reality of it is people will cash these accounts out because they're forced to, because they lost their job, because they are low on their savings. There's a number of reasons And yeah, it's the last place you want to go to get money because it's expensive, and it's also tapping into what you're trying to save for retirement. But if it's between me and my car getting taken back to the bank or feeding my family, I'm going to cash that out. And I think it's not such an easy black and white issue. It's complicated. But I think people are going to put their families and things going on in their lives as a most important asset than the 401k plan. I love that line. But let's talk a little bit about what your options are and the pros and cons of your options. As I said a while ago, your 401k money, if you leave your job or you get laid off from your job, that money can be transferred into any type of an account. And let's start with what we talked about a second ago, and that is a cash out. That's where you leave the company, and let's say that the company's 401k plan is held in Fidelity. You call the 1-800 number, and you tell them that you want to cash out of the plan, and they'll withhold 20% automatically. If you're under 59.5, they'll charge you 10% to cover the IRS penalty, and then you got to pay taxes if of whatever the 20% didn't cover. It's expensive, and I've always said it's obviously not the ideal place to go if you need money, but what a blessing it is to have it. If you've got to, you've got to. It is what it is. So one of the things that I always recommend is just take out enough, or take out an amount that will keep you going for a couple of months. Because if things work out for you and you get another job, then you didn't end up taking out 5 or 6 months worth and trying to put it back. So just take out a little bit at a time. And that's where I think it makes more sense to work with an advisor on that. So there's the cash out. The second is to another 401k plan. I'm not a big advocate of most 401k plans. I'm a big advocate of the match by the employer. I think that makes sense. You never want to leave free money on the table. So if your employer is matching up to a certain point, you want to put enough money back that you get all that free money, and you get to use it. You don't want to leave that on the table. That's free money. Now, as I've said, if there comes a point where you look at it and you go, well, this 401k there's no match to it. The investments there's not a whole lot of investments. And with an investment account such as a 401k, we can make a 401k work as long as it has a S&P 500 index fund and just a general bond index fund. And you can, for another time we'll talk about that, but you can move money in and out of those as far as your risk level goes. But even a lot of 401k plans don't even have that. And so without a match, I would definitely think twice. With a match, yeah, that could make sense. But that doesn't mean you have to roll over your money into that account. I say, and this is just my opinion, as a general rule of thumb, it makes sense to, if you have a chance, you have an opportunity to move that money from the 401k plan. And the 401k plan, it's the account that most people's wealth is built up in, and you get a chance to move it, and you get a chance to do things with it that you can't do with your 401k plan, which we can talk about, then you definitely want to take advantage of that. So that is definitely a big bias of mine, because I think that the 401k plan is flawed on a few levels and just doesn't offer everything that it should. When you move it out, you have control over your expenses. you have way more control over risk and selection of funds. And chances are, if you're not wanting to do it yourself, you can have an advisor that can help you make those decisions that you once before you're trying to make by yourself. And the very nice thing about it is the advisor is going to take care of the move from the 401k plan to your new IRA, and that's a good thing. Now, let me point out when it's probably not a good time to implement new strategies. If you're in between a job and you are in a situation where you're not sure how long it's going to take, I wouldn't just take that money and get it invested. I think I'd keep it in cash until you got to a point where you were hired. Then I would invest it, because you don't want to tie anything up unless it's a situation that's not tied up and you can get your hands on the money. Worst case scenario, if you had to do so. And all of the transfers we're talking about are tax-free and do not cost you anything. So there's another type of rollover called a 60-day rollover. And that's where you take the money out of an IRA and you can hold it for 60 days, but you have to get that money back into another IRA before the end of the 60th day. And if you do that, that's considered a qualified rollover and will not cost you taxes or penalties, which is a good thing. Now please hear me out on this. You can only do this one time every 12 months. You can't do it multiple times in a year. So the 60-day rollover, I've seen people just have a shortfall of money and they need that covered for 30 days, 40 days, and they take advantage of it and they put the money back and everything works out great. It's just one of the problems with that is that although it's great to know it's sitting there, that can turn into a taxed account really. The money that comes out could turn into a taxable event very quickly and get penalized if you're under the age of 59 and a half. So just be careful about that. Finally, the rollover that a lot of people aren't aware of is if you're sitting in a 401k plan and you are above the age of 59 and a half, you can actually move that money to an IRA. And just like if you were and still be employed by the bank or by the company. So that's something to consider if you're in a situation where you are wanting to move that money to something more of a managed type of an account and get more options like we talked about, and to have a little bit better control of the expenses. So that is the complicated, uncomplicated world of transferring money from one account to another account. It's not that difficult. We do them all the time. And I love the idea of the government to charge a fee to do this. We'll talk more when those rules and regulations come alive, and we'll talk about why that's probably not a good idea. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you've got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.